It's incredible the repercussions a fictional story can have in real life. Did you think you could write your romantic novel with taboo themes just to warm the thighs of the ladies who read that stuff? You are wrong, my dear. Cross the line and the police themselves will come down on you. Not the police of political correctness, nor the grammar police, but the police that made Indiana Jones jump from that dam, or Blade leap from that building. The police, and they're gonna arrest you. Not to warn you or to see if everything is good at home, but to send you to the big house. This happened in Australia a few months ago when an author named Tesolin-Mastrosa, who published under the names Tori Woods or Lauren Ashley, was accused of producing child sexual abuse material because of the content of her novel Daddy's Little Toy. And yes, we're talking about a work of fiction, not a real case. But the scandal was so big that it ended up in court, with headlines in The Guardian and other TV shows, People, and the News of Australia. The book, self-published on Amazon, was marketed as a dark romance, that trendy subgenre where morally twisted relationships are explored. Power, submission, obsession, trauma, guilt, all within the erotic terrain. And until there, nothing new. The problem lies with the premise. An 18-year-old girl who falls in love with her father's best friend, a man who, according to the text itself, has desired her since she was 3. 3 years old! Not 13, which is already sick! 3! What the? And that's where everything collapsed. The cover showed the title Daddy's Little Toy in toy block letters, like children's blocks. The aesthetics of the book seemed designed to unsettle, and boy did it succeed. Formal complaints were filed, and the Australian police confiscated copies, arrested the author, and charged her with producing and distributing child abuse material. An almost unprecedented fact in the literary world. A fiction novel facing criminal charges for its sexual content. Since then, the case has divided critics, readers, and writers. To what extent can fiction talk about the forbidden without promoting it? Is it art or is it advocacy? And even if it's advocacy, are we still allowed to censor it? What happened to free speech? What happened to all this other stuff if it's just in the realm of fiction? If it's just a story written on paper, are we still allowed to arrest these people and censor their words? And where is the limit? That's the question we're asking here. The author claims everything has been taken out of context, that the book does not promote child abuse or pedophilia, that it simply deals with dark themes from a narrative, not a moral perspective. And in theory, that is what dark romance does. Explore what society considers unacceptable, but without intending to validate it. The problem with Daddy's Little Toy is that it seems to break that tacit pact between author and reader. In most controversial works, the discomfort serves a function. And of course, we have to talk about the text, the novel, that it always comes up in these kind of situations, these kinds of texts. Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. In Lolita, for example, Nabokov portrays the mind of a predator, but the book does not justify him. On the contrary, it strips him naked, shows manipulation, self-deception, cruelty. The reader feels trapped within the mind of the abuser, not complicit in his desire. That is why Lolita remains literature, not propaganda. In contrast, in Daddy's Little Toy, according to the excerpts analyzed by media, the tone does not appear to distance itself from the romantic fantasy. The adult man is not portrayed as a monster, but as a desirable figure. The attraction is romanticized, not problematized. And that nuance changes everything. Now that everyone wants to ditch conventions and sell books by scandal and shock the reader, we have the case of Half His Age, the new book by Jennette McCurdy, the funny girl from iCarly. The same McCurdy who wrote I'm Glad My Mom Died, that brutal testimony about child abuse and maternal control in the entertainment industry. This time it isn't a memoir she wrote, but a novel, a work of fiction about a 17-year-old girl who falls in love with her married teacher. The title, Half His Age, already seems a provocation. And no, age is not just a number. It is a number with meaning that divides generations, experiences, maturity, naivety. The publisher Ballantine Books' Penguin Random House describes it as a story about desire, power, sex, and self-discovery. But social media did not buy the explanation. Since the announcement, comments have filled with accusations that McCurdy romanticizes grooming, where adults earn a minor's trust until they involve them in their sexual games, that she turns the adult-minor relationship into an aesthetically acceptable fantasy. They were not arresting this case, of course, but the cultural scandal was quite strong as well. Both cases resemble each other more than they seem. In both, there is an adolescent and an older man, a relationship marked by a power imbalance and an uncomfortable question. Is this critique or is this fantasy? The difference lies in context. In Australia, Daddy's Little Toy touched the very core of the crime, the sexualization of a 3-year-old girl, and that is why justice intervened. In Half His Age, the protagonist is 17, still a minor, but on the legal border, right where the debate becomes slippery. Both explore desires, but in opposite ways. In the Australian case, the adult's desire is presented as legitimate, almost heroic. In McCurdy's case, at least as far as we know, the viewpoint seems to be the girl's: teenage longing, confusion, loneliness. The question is whether the novel manages to show manipulation or whether it conceals it under a melancholic aesthetic. Because that is the trick of grooming. It doesn't feel like abuse. It disguises itself as love, connection, destiny. And when fiction reproduces that feeling without dismantling it, the reader ends up reliving the predator's illusion, not analyzing it, but empathizing with it. The aesthetics of abuse. The current publishing industry is obsessed with the taboo. Dark romance sales, Amazon, Wattpad, TikTok, all are filled with covers of dominant men, innocent students, on equal ages. It is presented as empowerment, but often it just recycles the same patriarchal power dynamic with a different wrapper. What makes Daddy's Little Toy grotesque and Half His Age debatable is the same mechanism, the erotization of imbalance. In the first book, the age gap is literal child abuse. In the second, the symbolic power is just as strong. The teacher, the student, the idealization of the older man who sees what no one else sees in her. And that is a dangerous fantasy, the ideal that adult validation turns a minor into someone special. And that narrative, repeated over and over, leaves marks on culture. The internet is full of dark romance novels that cross boundaries, abusive relationships, kidnappings, violence, trauma. But like any extreme genre, it demands at least some narrative awareness. When no critical distance is established, when the story does not make it clear that what it shows is destructive, the narrative begins to sound like endorsement. And that is where the danger comes in, when thrill replaces artistic intention. In Lolita, the reader ends up devastated. In Daddy's Little Toy, many readers, according to reviews before its removal, took it as simple taboo romance, something to fantasize about. And that alarmed Australian authorities, that a work written and sold on mass platforms can trivialize real abuse under the label of entertainment. The police in New South Wales took action in March 2025 after receiving complaints. They confiscated copies, arrested the author, and formally charged her. In April, she sought to keep her identity hidden, but the court in Blacktown denied it. Her name, her book, and her face were already all over the internet. Censorship or justice? The case raises an uncomfortable question. How far can fiction go before the state intervenes? Because whether we like it or not, that is Little Toys and a fictional story. And prosecuting a writer for what they imagine carries enormous implications for artistic freedom. But at the same time, Australia has very strict laws about what it calls child abuse material, even if it's fictional. And let's be honest, if your story involves sexual desire toward a 3-year-old girl, even if it's within fiction, you're going to have trouble. The curious thing is that these kind of stories are not rare in online self-publishing. Digital platforms like Amazon or Wattpad are full of titles tagged with taboo, age gap, forbidden love. The difference is that That Is Little Toy went viral and someone decided to look beyond the morbid curiosity. Part of the appeal of dark romance comes from what we are not supposed to read. Breaking taboos can be cathartic, provocative, blah blah blah. But when that taboo becomes commodity, when child abuse becomes just a plot twist to sell, the taboo stops being transgressive, it becomes banal. And that is where this case becomes symbolic. It is not just about an Australian author arrested, it's about a symptom of how independent publishing platforms and the editorial market are pushing the limits without always knowing where the hell the abyss lies. Because Lolita was written to make you uncomfortable. That Is Little Toy was apparently written to entertain. And that is the biggest and most dangerous difference. Tesolin-Mastrosa remains free on bail awaiting trial. Her case is still open and will likely set a precedent. Can a book be illegal for what it imagines, or should be bad taste and public critique suffice to condemn it? Maybe the most uncomfortable lesson is that in the digital dark romance era, the boundaries between fiction and advocacy are not decided only by the reader, but also by the law. And I don't wanna chit-chat for too long, nor I wanna offend anybody, but I know I might be considered somebody conservative, dull, boring, because I do think it's weird that this is the direction our fantasy, our writers are heading into. I understand the desire to explore what seems forbidden. I understand the desire to explore what seems taboo. But there are some taboos still here that are little by little getting more accepted and that seem to be okay to write about, despite the fact that it's taboo. Like this whole age gap thing between older men and way too young women. It's more and more okay nowadays in this world, where some other taboos are simply no. Let's imagine what if we will normalize in fiction incest towards an adult male and his daughter. That would be extremely problematic, and still people will find it repulsive in fiction, whereas these other aspects of literature are not. Despite the fact that they are problematic, despite the fact that in real life, it's not me saying it, or I don't know, the Catholic Church or the government or some old-fashioned teacher, but psychologists, research are saying it. People are not mature enough to deal with these sort of relationships, and that the power dynamics, it's problematic in these relationships. Because even when we see these stories portrayed in other art forms, especially in the media, in TV, in movies, they show this relationship as dark, conflictive, problematic, tragic, obscure. They portray them as something that we should think about and be cautious about, dangerous. But in self-published industry, everything is valid. So they show the exact same stories as romantic love, as perfectly okay, as kind of taboo, mysterious, but still cool and sexy. And I see a problem there. I completely see a problem there. Because a lot of the behaviors portrayed in this fiction are predatory. The only difference they have with these crepes that appear in How to Catch a Predator is that they are a silver fox, that they are attractive, appealing men. That is definitely, I would say, a problem. Something that is still interesting and bizarre is that most of these stories, the majority of them, are written by women, showing that there's still this aspect of fantasizing about a bad boy or an older, sophisticated man that's mature and is gonna show you how the world works. Having this very weird dynamic like a father figure, teacher, and sexual partner. Proof of how this massive subgenre in literature contains in all the covers and all the titles the word daddy. And I understand it's fiction, I understand it's a fantasy, but all fantasies and fictions start to feed a real idea and notion within ourselves. Real predators in the real world, feed this desire, this hunger with stories, with fictions, until they move it to the real world, and that is dangerous. And putting this cultural veil in fiction of what seems cool and aesthetically interesting, erotically pleasing, will show future generations that exploring these dynamics might be okay, might be important and ideal. Whereas, as many people have pointed out, is nothing else but toxic and just plain, I would say, wrong. But these are just my opinions from my perspective, so probably I'm completely out of place. I don't know. You will tell me. I know people are very, very strong about their love for their literary genres. Every time I talk about erotic novels, people get very upset because I don't like that genre at all. And yeah, it just doesn't fly well with the community. But that's just me. What do you think about it? Do you think it was alright for the police to arrest this lady? Do you think it crossed a line? And what do you think is going to happen with the future of literature when the stories that are taking more relevance nowadays are self-published? They are not being monitored by an editorial house, editors, by companies, but anybody can publish whatever they feel like online, and anybody can read it and make them popular. Where is the future of literature going? What's gonna happen? It's worrisome.